Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 231. And first off, I apologize for today's sound quality. I do not have access to the microphone that I usually use for recording these, but don't worry, next week I definitely will. And today I found a pretty good alternative that still has sound cancellation, so now it kind of just feels like you're on a phone call with me. But anyways, I hope you're all doing amazing. What a week it just was. And this will be a very important podcast today since we're about a week out from the total lunar eclipse on September 7th, an event that I've been talking about all year. And we're finally here. And after the week we just experienced, where pretty much everything except crypto finished off the month strong. It definitely feels like an isolated attack on crypto investors. I'm feeling it too, especially considering the fact that last Sunday, we had Ethereum push up into a new all-time high shortly after I released that week's Red Pill. And then that milestone immediately followed with a washout of the entire crypto market, where for the most part, we're still feeling that pain into this very important monthly close, where it won't just be a typical monthly candle close later today. It'll also be a bi-monthly, so that's a 2-month candle close, as well as a 4-month candle close. And since that's officially happening for the crypto market later today, this means that these crucial macro closures have already occurred in the traditional markets this past Friday. And then also coming up tomorrow will be a 3-day weekend. So Monday will be closed in the traditional markets. So crypto will be trading alone again tomorrow. So keep that in mind since that's now come and gone. We officially have new all-time high candle closes on the monthly, bi-monthly, and 4-month candles for the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, and even gold, which, by the way, gold just closed a new daily candle at all-time highs this past Friday as well. So with all these bullish milestones accomplished for that list that I just mentioned moments ago, the question now is, why is crypto looking so weak for this time frame if everything else is looking so strong? So that's exactly what we're going to focus on here in today's Red Pill podcast. Again, I apologize for the sound quality today. I did my best to find an alternative. For the most part, I think it's sounding decent, but we have a lot of charts to cover today. So let's get straight into it. And as always, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer if it's getting a little later out there in the matrix, or any beverage of your choice. Of course, I'm going with some pure water today, nice and boring. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. So if it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 projects will be selected for next week's Red Pill. So let me just make sure my sound is working. All right. So be an interesting one. Also shows problem solving and solutions are so important when you're operating at this level. I hope you guys at least appreciate that. Anyways, as mentioned in the intro moments ago, we have an undeniably bullish list of new milestones achieved for the traditional markets and gold. And even the Russell 2000 has closed its 2-month and 4-month candles at new all-time highs. Let me just quickly show you that because that's definitely something to consider with where we're at here in crypto land. And as you can see, we have this bi-monthly candle close, new all-time highs for the Russell 2000 as well as the 4-month. So what's going on with crypto? Well, as mentioned in the past 3 red pills, we had a very precarious setup with the August new moon. That's followed by the total lunar eclipse, which will be next week. And although technically we did in fact have the official Bitcoin all-time high accomplished during the month of August, I'll show you right here on August 13th into the 14th, if you want to count that as well. We not only had that new all-time high hit for Bitcoin in the month of August, as well as we had Ethereum, which just hit a new all-time high in August last week, along with Binance Coin, BNB, hitting a new all-time high on August 22nd. This means that 3 out of the top 4 crypto projects, excluding Tether, of course, have hit all-time highs within this month of August 2025, which of course lands after the start of our lunar cycle here in crypto land, which was back in March earlier this year, and also before the second lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, which will be next week. And this was something that I've been expecting for some time now regarding the quote unquote timing of things. But what has yet to happen that I was expecting leading up to this eclipse season in September was a breakout into price discovery for XRP. So that was definitely a miscalculation. And although I was wrong about the timing of this specific move based on everything I'm seeing right now in these charts with the gold pattern that I've been tracking and showing you, also the Ethereum chart, which just happened last week, and Bitcoin dominance and how that's looking right now, this setup overall still provides an optimistic outlook for further expansion on the altcoins as Bitcoin gives up its dominance for the rest of this cycle. And I believe XRP will still have that major upside impulse later this year. I still see it happening within this calendar year. Now that we're approaching September, we all know to expect surprises around eclipse season, and we're getting what I believe is a balancing act across the board, where, as I talked about in last week's Red Pill, we had Ethereum now taking over and becoming exciting. While when we look back a little bit earlier in the year, we had things like XLM, XRP, and HBAR looking very exciting. That basket of projects had its exciting moment, then now it's shifting over to ETH and Binance token. And we even saw how good Solana looked this week, considering all things. So I think that we are balancing. And now to summarize everything I just said, we're still on track for an alt season. We have all the signs of an incoming alt season. And the exoteric narrative is out there regarding rate cuts. You've heard it so many times, right? So the next Federal Reserve FOMC meeting will be landing on September 17th, which is also precariously placed in the middle of eclipse season. You can guarantee that is for a reason, because as many of you are probably aware, the Federal Reserve Board is 100% Kabbalists. They wouldn't be able to get there without their initiation, sacrifice, and ritual. It is what it is. So for me, I'm sure many of you would agree, I feel like September will probably be the most difficult month to navigate for retail investors, especially in crypto. But we've been talking about this pivotal month now for a long time regarding this upcoming eclipse season. I'm expecting a similar roller coaster ride to what we experienced this month in August, which will make September a pivot month. It's something that I've been talking about for a long time. I've actually also mentioned this regarding March, April of this year, which was again because of eclipse season. I knew this before any tariff talk was going on. We actually knew of this pivot before Trump even won the election, because I've been talking about this particular eclipse for over a year now. We actually even have documentation of it in the very beginning of June 2024 in the crypto decoding blueprint, where I was talking about how the rest of this cycle will go leading into this March eclipse. And I even mentioned the idea of after this March eclipse to expect higher prices in Bitcoin before the September lunar eclipse. That was kind of what I was talking about at the beginning of today's podcast. It's not to flex, it's not to say I'm right. I don't really want to even put energy into that anymore, because this is something that we've been talking about going back to pretty much here, March and February of 2023, when I was prepping everyone for this exact chart that we're looking at right now, the exact chart, the start of our solar cycle. And since we've seen an uptrend and continuation to the upside, and because in our last cycle here in 2020 to 2021, where we started our lunar cycle with a notable correction, then recovery into the next lunar eclipse, that was what I was anticipating this time as well. And we're doing the same thing. The only thing that's been different though And where my miscalculation lies, of course, is because of Bitcoin dominance. And that's one thing that I probably should have put a lot more emphasis on, and something that I would definitely, if I had to add in additional notes into my crypto decoding blueprint, I will definitely adjust over time. The fact that Bitcoin dominance is its own entity and you do need to treat it and respect it as its own thing. And if you combine that additional element, it will make your analysis even better. And if you were to include the USDT dominance, it will get even better. But I think this cycle that we're in now has taught us so much, especially when we're considering the esoteric. So anyways, getting back to this, we've had a similar thing occur between the end of our solar cycle and the start of our lunar cycle, because we peaked in this green box before we had the lunar eclipse and the start of the lunar cycle. We did the same thing. We peaked here, had a major correction, the biggest correction so far, at the same time when we're considering the astrology. Then we had this recovery move with a little bit of a stall out in the middle, which was this stall out right here that we got in May, June, and then a final push higher into right before the second lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. Now, what I think is going to be even more like slightly nuanced about this cycle is that the fact that Bitcoin dominance has held strong from this move through this move, and just until recently, it started to show weakness. This is a good sign because ETH just retested prior all-time highs. So I know this sounds like a lot of thoughts. For those of you that have been here for a while, you know this is kind of just compiling ideas and putting it all together. And again, I was definitely wrong about my outlook on XRP into this time frame. I do believe that what we're seeing with ETH, though, makes everything very promising. With what I'm seeing with Binance and what I'm seeing with ETH and what I'm seeing with Bitcoin dominance, I'll continue to say it. I feel like that still feels very promising for us to get this double-digit XRP, likely still within this calendar year. And we'll dial that in more as we go. But for now, we just have to look at how this rotation plays out, and we need to put our emphasis more on September as the pivot month rather than isolating out one project from another project and putting all our energy into that. Again, perhaps another lesson learned too. But ultimately, when you look back at when we were accumulating these projects, it was much, much lower than where we're at today. We're not going to go over that again. So to just focus on this moving forward, now that we're about a week out from this lunar eclipse, we just check okay, we're good. Consider September a pivot month regarding the technicals, and we'll likely end up seeing that in the charts when the month of September closes up. And that's been the case since Bitcoin started trading publicly on exchanges 15 years ago, regarding what September represents. Now, let's get to the main theme of today's podcast that I want to focus on the most here, which is I believe we are actually repeating 2020. And that's not the first time many of you have heard me say this. Why? Well, because the tariff crash that we had back in March, April, over here, very similar to the C19 crash back here in 2020. So we have this very similar V-shaped recovery that we also just had, and then a push to new all-time highs immediately after, perfectly mimicking the C19 crash back in 2020. And now, of course, this is a lot more noticeable on the traditional markets charts. When you look at the major indices, you look at the S&P, NASDAQ, etc., you're going to see that the way 2020 went is very similar to how everything has been since the tariff crash in March, April, followed by the recovery into May, June, and the push higher into just last week. It's pretty much tracking perfectly. And of course, we have to consider crypto is much more volatile. So this correction that we had over here following the August top into early September move, that was not as volatile for the traditional markets, of course. You can't expect it to be. It's always more volatile here in crypto. So when we look back at the 2020 charts, and compare to where we're at today, it's undeniable how similar they are. So now let's take a moment to look at these charts from 2020 and compare them to this year here in 2025, month by month, starting with the Bitcoin chart. And here we are back in 2020. Of course, we have this C19 crash and then a full recovery back into the month of May. You could look at the time frame by just looking at this part of the screen. So when I hover, you'll see that we have the crash recovery into May. Same as we experienced here in 2020. We have the crash and then recovery into May, still within the month of May, and we fully recovered from where we dropped off. So same. Then we chopped sideways over here for the month of June. Here, it was the same. We had this chop sideways into the month of June, very early July, and then we pushed higher in July. Here, we pushed higher in July. Same as we just experienced. Then back in 2020, we actually made a local high on August 17th, which then immediately followed with a correction. And here we are in 2025. Our local top is August 13th, also immediately experiencing a correction. Became very noticeable last week, especially after I released the last red pill. Now take a moment to zoom in and look at the exact date we topped in August, and you'll see how it looked in August 2020. We have August 17th and August 18th, this Twin Towers candle formation. Just take a mental picture of what this looks like. Now let's go over to today. We're going to see we have same. Only 4 days off, but same. Twin Towers candle, immediate correction into the start of September, just like we're getting right now. Now, after this local top was formed in August of 2020, I just want to show you a couple of things that occurred. From the absolute top to this local low, it took about 3 weeks, and we had about a 21% correction into the first week of September. We had a low pivot in the first week of September and then a bullish recovery after that. And then around the October full moon, if I remember correctly, yep. After the October full moon, we pretty much just continued to the upside. So also keep that in mind because we have the October full moon this year on October 7th. Guys, that's not far away. That's like a month and some change. Okay? So everyone that's getting a little worried right now, just remember seasonality is on your side here, especially when you look at the traditional markets for October, November, December. And of course, you have Bitcoin, where October and November are 2 out of our 3 best performing months. And November, historically, the end of cycles for Bitcoin on the macro side of things. So here we are, we're so damn close. All right. And what could be the case for us this year is that the first week of September is the worst it gets. And then we push through. And then it starts to look promising after the October full moon, which was the case back in 2020, and also in several other examples that we'll go into a little bit later. But just to stay on track here, for the sake of time, we have a nearly identical move up into August, Twin Towers candle, correction, same thing we just got here in 2025. Twin Towers candle, correction into the start of September. But when we're looking at the full correction amount, because I brought up it was about 21% over the course of 22 days. I mean, we're pretty much right there if we were to consider the amount of days. 22 days, about 21% brings you to around a 98K Bitcoin. So this would be us entertaining what I'm calling the extremes, because to see a 98K Bitcoin this soon, I mean, unless it's 100% ritualized and they do like a 97K Bitcoin for the 9/7 eclipse date, because we have September 7th, 9/7 date. We remember back on April 7th, that was our low for the market. We have on the 97th day, we're comparing to the 9/7 date. There's something there. Also, that 21 number showing up again in the weeks. There's a couple ways to do this, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I've been decoding so much leading up into this time frame. The work speaks for itself, and I just really want to focus on the charts today. So that would be your extremes. Considering this move back to retesting the lows of June 22nd. Now, I personally think this is a more extreme outcome, but remember, we're moving into eclipse season, and these eclipses are brutal on the crypto market specifically, all right? So we need to be prepared for such a possibility. just like what happened back in March and April earlier this year. And remember, these things are quickly bought up, and when we get oversold, we have a tendency to spring back rather fast. So during sell-offs, it gets fearful. We can see fear and greed index start to drop into, extreme fear. And during those times, panic is just pushing retail. All of their money goes straight to the institutions, pretty much. It's just a handing over effect. And I think, again, what we're seeing with Ethereum right now is showing that everything that has transpired over the past 2 to 3 months is just a balance and a catch up, just like where we were at the 2020 timeframe, just like where we were at in the 2017 timeframe, too. It's very similar. So, with that being said, remember the pivot could be in the first week of September, and I want you to take a note of the date range of September 5th through 8th, by the way. So not only is it common for Bitcoin to pivot around eclipses, like we can see clearly here in this chart, it's also common for us to see the first week of September act as a pivot time as well. And since we did in fact experience a correction immediately following the August new moon just recently, and also we did not move up higher into the first couple days of September, which by the way, that happens about 80% of the time. So we're just continuing the theme that happens most of the time. Although the pattern that we found was showing that on those 4-year cycles, it doesn't happen. But again, we have Bitcoin at all-time highs. We had Ethereum just hit a new all-time high. We have Binance at all-time highs. So it doesn't feel like a lot now because again, unless you're putting a majority of your money into the top projects, sans XRP right now, it doesn't feel so great. But I mean, even considering XRP, it's technically when you go to the absolute bottom of the ETH chart to where we're at today on ETH, it's 391%. But if you were buying the bottom of the bear market on XRP to where we are today, you're up 800%. So if you just bought the bear market, you don't care about this fact that we're not expanding just yet. Again, it's just a lot of people entered late, which is very typical on altcoins. And if that's you, for example, don't feel bad, don't feel any shame or guilt. Like, we're not here to do that. It's a big reason, again, why I've been putting emphasis on XLM, because I feel like there's a little bit more ROI in that play. But more ROI means more short-term volatility. In order to gain a lot, you have to see a lot of pain and a lot of just chop in the midst of the rallies. And that's just the name of the game. That's what we signed up for. So you play the Bitcoin game, you have way less ROI. You also have way less downside pain to feel. You play the XRP game, it's actually felt pretty amazing considering that look at how much it's gained from the bear market to where we are today, and it's been holding the range a lot better than many other alts. Even the local correction that we've been seeing is feeling a lot better than a lot of other altcoins. So it's done its exciting move. ETH is now doing its exciting move, and once ETH has finished its exciting move, it will then spill over into things like XRP, XLM, HBAR, and a lot of other projects, like it always does. So, and again, I don't think I'm alone as an analyst when I've said that when XRP moves is not typically in isolation of everything else, it's happening all at the same time. Just like this move we got in November, everything was expanding at the same time. Even Bitcoin was breaking out. So keep that in mind. Now, getting back to this, we've had the August new moon correction. We did not move up higher into the first week of September, like I showed in scenarios covered in recent red pills. This means something else that I mentioned specifically in last week's red pill is very likely the reality that we're faced with here in 2025. So for the rest of this year, which is, quote, we are repeating what happened last year. And for those that have been with us here since early 2024, some of you might remember my Year of the Dragon Decoded, which I released at the beginning of 2024, and it focused on comparing that particular year to how the market performed in 1964. Why? Because the year of 1964 was the last year of the wood dragon. Just like in 2024, we were in the year of the wood dragon. And since that year went the way that it did, and we see what happened in 2024 compared to 1964, this is why earlier this year I kept last year's Chinese zodiac decode in mind when I was making the snake year decoded for 2025 for this year. And so far, there are so many similarities to how we traded back in 1965, the last year of the wood snake, which of course we're in here now in 2025. As you can see, wood snake and 1965 wood snake. Let's actually quickly open up the S&P 500 chart and check out how things were looking back in 1965 since I brought this up. Oh, by the way, this is really cool. If I show you this chart over here, you're going to see that we are so similar. This fractal overlay in white is the 1965 where we topped out to the lows, which took the same amount of days. It took 47 days. How crazy is that? And then we recovered up to here, and we're matching the fractal, which does show a pretty brutal mid-September, but it's not so perfect. There's just the major pivots that I would keep in mind. And this right here, the fact that it shows going higher into October, late November, before the next notable correction and start of a bear market, this actually aligns very nicely with the rest of our analysis for this year of 2025 for the crypto market. And remember, 1965, which is this fractal that we're showing you, is not the same world that we have here in 2025. Therefore, we had no crypto charts to compare back then. So remember, when the traditional markets are in a bull run, that's when crypto, well, when Bitcoin's in a bull run. We're never seeing like a bear market in the stock market and then Bitcoin just raging to new all-time highs. Not, they're in tandem. Let's just keep it nice and simple. So now that I've recapped that really quickly with you guys, and by the way, because we've had this turn of events into this upcoming monthly, bi-monthly, and 4-month candle close, I will be going over the gold chart with you later and the silver chart, and I'll also be going over the traditional markets as well as the Russell 2000. So here we are, 1965, year of the wood snake. And I believe this correction that we had from May into June was the one that we've already seen on Bitcoin, or you can just look February to April. I already showed you that. Then the recovery we're in here, it stops at about late November, has a little bit of a correction into December, and then it pushes even higher into when? Chinese New Year. So it transitions into the year of the horse in 1966, and that's when the bear market started. The stock market was up all the way until February 1966, which would align with February 2026. And keep in mind, Chinese New Year next year is on February 17th, which also happens to be the next annular solar eclipse. Let me just show you that really quickly. So this is Chinese New Year, February 17th, an annular solar eclipse. So that will be an incredibly powerful solar eclipse. And I'm definitely looking forward to prepping the Year of the Horse decoded this upcoming January, specifically because of that eclipse. That's going to be an epic decode for sure. But anyways, getting back to what I just mentioned moments ago regarding that there's a high likelihood of us repeating what happened last year. This is also something that I said in the last Red Pill podcast because of the way things were going. I also brought up how Bitcoin is doing something similar to 2020. Well, now let me bring in an additional element into this thesis, which is comparing where Ethereum was in 2020 to where it's at today. And then we'll check in on how another top performing altcoin was trading at the same exact time so that we can get a clearer picture of how everything's lining up for us here in this cycle. So again, this is very interesting and compelling for how the rest of this year can go, and a mimic of 1965, which, by the way, the US went to Vietnam during this, and we still had a bull run and went higher. Crazy. So I'm obviously, well, the reason you guys are all here is because I do esoteric investing. So I'm much more interested in what's going on in the astrology, numerology, and gematria, not what's going on in the news, which obviously this Vietnam thing, going to war, all of that's news. It's the same thing with the tariff war that we're in, which as of Friday, wasn't there another thing that came out that said now that Trump, it's illegal that he, whatever, man. It's all a distraction. So don't get distracted. Stay focused. If you got distracted by that mess back on April 7th, you wouldn't have been able to take advantage of that dip. All right. We're going to be looking at the Ethereum chart. Let's turn off all this noise for everybody. And I want to focus on this. So I said we just had a significant event last weekend. We hit a new all-time high. And then after momentarily hitting a new all-time high, we had a short-term correction. Well, now we'll go back to early 2018, and you're going to see this was the prior cycle before last alt season, and Ethereum topped on January 13th. It hit a price of about $1,424, around that price. That was the cycle peak. And then when we fast forward to when ETH hit a higher price, it was over here in January of 2021. Interestingly, it happened pretty much exactly 3 years later on January 19th, this candle right here. And you see what happened? So this was a new all-time high for ETH. It lasted a couple of hours, and then within the same daily candle, ETH was rejected, and then it experienced a notable correction. I know this doesn't seem like a lot, guys, but this was 26%. ETH hasn't even done half of this amount of correction so far. And then look, structurally, we just kept on moving. Barely looked like anything happened. Let's look at where we're at today. Structurally, we're fine. Higher lows. And look at today's recovery. Again, it's a Sunday, right? But everything we just had happen back on Sunday last week created a major CME gap on the Bitcoin chart, and I believe also the ETH chart. I'll look at that a little bit later. But Mamma mia, this was immediately followed by an instant correction after barely hitting a new all-time high, just like we had in the last cycle. The same thing happened over here. January 19th, 2021. So it's cool to see the visuals, right? Now, back in 2021, this move followed with about 2 weeks of chop, sideways chop before pushing higher into price discovery. And from that candle on January 19th of 2021 over to where we had a major impulse, we'll call it like the peak of the cycle, that initial peak, it lasted about 113 days of upwards momentum. And ETH did pretty well. I mean, if we were to track from just the daily candle open, I think that'd be one of the most fair ways to put it, up to the peak. It was about a 240% move in 113 days. I mean, that would be amazing if Ethereum just pulled that off this cycle. Let me quickly show you what that would look like. So we're going from the daily open is actually pretty much there. Actually, this would be around where I would call the extremes too. A 15K ETH. We've talked about this many times about the 14 to 15K ETH because of the gematria. You have ETH, which by the way, 33, and we see how bullish ETH was during the 33rd week of the year. Pretty wild. Anyways, so with ETH, we have the 15 and the 14 there in gematria. Then we have the 41 in reduction, which is the mirror of 14, right? 41 backwards 14. So that's something to keep in mind about the $14,000 ETH. I think that's definitely possible. And if we were to track from prior cycle peak to what that would be this time around, that would be a 180% move. That's a lot. It sounds like a lot, but what that will produce on many other altcoins will be such mind-blowing gains. Like, you don't need a lot for ETH to see what that translates to on a lot of other speculative altcoins. But anyways, let's stay on track here. I believe this is already fascinating stuff for you guys to see the visuals of the fact that we moved up into the prior cycle peak and immediately got rejected, just like we've already had happen back in 2021. And if we were to measure from that particular candle of when we hit that milestone and go over 113 days, which is something that happened in the last cycle, you can see that it took us till the middle of December. That's, again, within this calendar year, just like I was mentioning before with regards to XRP. And by the way, if you look at when ETH and XRP topped in the 2017 cycle, it was into that month of December and the very first week of January. So it's around the same time of year as well. Nothing too off from what we saw in 2017. And when we look at the way XRP is moving right now, it looks very similar to 2017. Nothing like 2021 cycle, while ETH is looking much more similar to the cycle prior. It's obviously had some nuances that are different, but even this major washout into the tariff crash like we had with the C19 crash. So we have the C19 crash, we have this pivot up and the backup phase. That was over here, pivot up, backup phase, and then just launched and made it back to the new all-time high shortly after. It's a very similar structure, believe it or not. So please keep that in mind in regards to the timing of things regarding December. I do believe I brought this up in last week's Red Pill, but now that we've revisited that information, I actually want to go back to the January 19th, 2021 part of the Ethereum chart when we were retesting prior all-time highs. And remember, this was the date that Ethereum actually momentarily hit a new all-time high and then got rejected for pushing deeper into price discovery. Now that we have that in our minds, we want to go over to the Dogecoin chart. Because I want to see where Doge was trading at on January 19th, 2021, just so you can see for yourself the visuals. So here we are, we have the prior cycle. Here's January 19th, 2021. Now look to the left, prior cycle, January 19th, 2021. We actually pushed a little bit lower, believe it or not, for the following week, showing that ETH was even more dominant, stealing the dominance, which I believe is the theme right now, and measuring to the prior cycle peak was almost 150% away, while ETH was already retesting all-time highs. Don't you see how similar we are right now when we look at the prior all-time high to where we're trading at with ETH or with Doge? I mean, it's an even better position to be in today, considering the fact of all the upside potential. You have a 240% up to retesting the all-time highs. Consider that. We're over 200% away, but the fact that ETH was already almost breaking out into price discovery here, and we still had 150% to go to retest that cycle peak from 2018. And by the way, for those that weren't in crypto back in 2020, Doge was literally one of the best performing altcoins. Excuse me. So when you consider that it was one of the best performing altcoins and you measure from around this bear market average, let's just say it was 0.003 up to the peak of around 75 cents, it was a 24,000% bull run. If you just bought anywhere in this range over here of around 3 cents, that's not even considering getting in below that level, which was many opportunities too. So just consider, this is why I chose Doge for this example, because where it's at now structurally looks very similar to where ETH was trading at the same time of the last cycle, which makes this the part of the cycle where ETH is taking most of the dominance away from Bitcoin. So all of this drainage that we're seeing in the Bitcoin dominance chart, it's actually mostly going into ETH, right? And then what we see later on is we should see September, October is your pivot, and then ETH dominance along with USDT dominance will drain into the lower cap alts. The typical pattern we usually see. Now, getting back to this theory that this year is a repeat of last year, considering that we peaked before eclipse season, then corrected into eclipse season, and then price pushed higher after eclipse season. And considering seasonality, this could mean the lows come in early September, then we push up higher into the middle of the month, likely around the exoteric event of the upcoming FOMC on September 17th. Perhaps this event even gives us a little more relief until the following week. Maybe because this happens on a Wednesday, we push up a little bit higher into September 18th, September 19th, for example, maybe September 20th for Bitcoin. And then we get to Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year, which will be on the partial solar eclipse. September 21st into September 22nd, again, feeling almost exactly like last year, where Rosh Hashanah was an October 2nd to October 4th, and Bitcoin was recovering from the September 6th lows right over here. We pushed up and then topped right before Rosh Hashanah and then had a pretty notable pullback. So, in plain English, imagine we have Bitcoin pushing up a little bit after it bottoms, so we could for sure still go lower into the upcoming eclipse. Then we pivot, we push up into around September 18th, September 19th, and then we get rejected. We come down again for the Rosh Hashanah timeframe. And then once we get fully through the month of September, continue our run to the upside. So this is kind of again revisiting the visual that I drew out for you in last week's Red Pill. Now, Bitcoin topped last year 4 days before Rosh Hashanah, and 4 days before Rosh Hashanah this year is September 18th, which is literally the day after the FOMC meeting. So this would make sense considering rate cuts can be a sell the news setup. And we talked about this last week as well. And if we're to continue selling off into the first week of September, like we did last year and in 2020, then it would make sense to have a bit of a recovery bounce into the FOMC. And best case scenario is Bitcoin holds its range while Bitcoin dominance continues to fall. So what I mean by hold its range is that it holds that 100K territory. And in the event the FOMC is not a sell the news outcome, then great. We'll still have the pivot overall for the crypto market during eclipse season. And I suppose it'll just be a less dramatic turn of events. Great. Again, as long as we're holding bullish structure and we're continuing a higher highs and higher lows structure, and we're seeing the same signs we've seen in previous cycles leading up to an alt season, that's all we need to keep our composure and stay focused on finishing this cycle strong. So to wrap up this section of today's Red Pill, September is a pivot month, and October can be an exception in that as well, but the lowest we went last year was in September. And then we had October was a higher low. So even though we weren't like full blown bullish and pushing into new all-time highs in October, we were just holding structure. So the lows that we recently got are the ones that we get in the first week of September. That might be the lowest we get for Bitcoin. And then we recover. And then if we do get a little bit of a correction in the beginning of October, again, it's just higher lows. So it's maintaining structure. I hope this all makes sense. And not only did this happen last year, by the way, the concept of a September low and a recovery in October, that also happened in 2023. It also happened in 2021, technically. And as I showed you earlier, it happened in 2020, was similar to the 2024 structure, where we had a correction that bottomed in the first week of September, followed by a higher lows reversal structure into the following month of October. And we were pushing higher in the month of October in 2024, 2023, 2021, 2020, and also 2017, which aligns in many ways with our bull run we're experiencing today. Also in 2016, which of course both of those examples were during Trump's presidency, during his first term, like we're here today with the Trump presidency. Also have some tariff nonsense like we had back in 2016 as well. Bitcoin and several other cryptos had to live through that mess. And Bitcoin just pushed higher and higher and higher, very similarly, actually. And we also even had this September October thing occur in 2013 during Bitcoin's first cycle. We had September as a pivot month, and October Bitcoin pushed higher. And here in 2025, that's what I'm expecting as well, especially with what I just showed you with where ETH is at now compared to our last cycle. And also keep in mind that when Bitcoin dominance topped in our last cycle, which was January 3rd, 2021, you see what Bitcoin did when it topped out? We had about 5 months of Bitcoin dominance just draining out. But keep in mind, January 3rd, 2021. Let me show you where the Bitcoin price was on January 3rd, 2021. We were here. We were about 32K Bitcoin. And many of you are aware we went much higher in the Bitcoin chart. Bitcoin topped about 94% higher, while Bitcoin dominance lost 45%. So we saw Bitcoin dominance top when Bitcoin was trading around 34 to 35K. And during the collapse of Bitcoin's dominance from the start of the year in 2021 until May 2021, about 5 months later, you'll see Bitcoin price went up an additional 90% or so, while this whole drain was happening in Bitcoin dominance. This is actually a very important thing to consider because we have a similar setup here as well, where we had Bitcoin dominance top around here. Let me show you. We have June 27th. We've been on a notable downtrend since. Here's June 27th. And since we've had Bitcoin actually hit almost 125K. So we're seeing something in alignment there as well. Now let's get into these charts, review the setup into the week ahead. We have our upcoming monthly close later today for the crypto market. We've already had it for our traditional markets. And I actually want to start here with the gold chart. And then we'll go into the traditional markets and of course wrap this up with our altcoins. Now we have this chart. I've been tracking it for a while now, showing you this setup into the last time we had Bitcoin all-time high in alt season, the time before that, and also this time in 2013. And there's definitely a relationship with the month of August and September. Here you can see 2017, it was September 7th. We have this major peak followed by a correction. Bitcoin gained 300% during this gold correction, and we had an alt season. I am expecting this to happen again because we have gold in price discovery. So this shouldn't shock anyone to see this kind of rotation happen. And the fact that we just closed off a new monthly all-time high with an expansion candle, like, because we had about 4 months in a row of resistance. This one was like a release of the energy. This is a very good thing to see, but then also we have to consider like could have some divergences playing out. We obviously have a much higher RSI going back to March, and then even here noticeably on April. We'll see how this goes. I mean, I don't play everything based off of like just a couple of connections here, like a bearish divergence, for example. I would want to look at many other things, but this seasonal time frame that we see this rotation is not weird for gold, again, because I showed you before in prior analysis that we tend to drain out into the month of December. Here it was into the month of December, and also here it was into the month of December. And that's very weird how Bitcoin has also been hitting these all-time highs November, December on all three of these iterations. There's definitely something to this. And if this extends even longer, like it did back in 2021, where we can see the gold price drained all the way until March, that was around when alt season was complete with most of its gains. That would be in alignment with the year of the horse and what I just showed you with 1965 moving into 1966. Perhaps we do get that final little push up into January, February. Remember, January 2018, we topped with all the altcoins, while Bitcoin was topped in December. I would love for that to happen, by the way, because that would defer the capital gains to the following tax year. But anyways, the market shouldn't do what I want. We have to be neutral and take this for what it is. But what we're seeing right now in the gold chart looks very, very good. Clearly showing signs of strength. Let's look at silver because silver also has now closed one of its highest daily closes in since 2011. Let me look at the monthly. Mamma mia. This is the highest monthly close that we've had for silver. Yeah, still not there. We still have a bit to go to 47, but this is this is a lot of progress. This is a lot of progress. So we're finally now moving up into this zone that silver has been dealing with now going back to 1980. It's not lasted so long. It would be, of course, great to see it outlast its last time being in here, which funny enough was in uh ended in August. But let's see. This lasted about 212 days. We just got in this pocket 212 days from today would be pretty much still in the calendar year, technically. It would be like New Year's. So it'd be fascinating to see how once we got into this area last cycle, it ended pretty quickly after that. We only had about 1 month more of bullish before it just completely collapsed. I don't know if that'll be the same case this time around. I think silver is primed and ready for price discovery. It's been suppressed for too long. Even right now, it's still like technically feeling suppressed. If you're somebody who's a silver holder, you're somebody who's been invested in it for some time, it's naturally felt better to be in gold just because of the excitement and euphoria. And you don't really want to invest in things when they're exciting and euphoric. You want to invest in things when they're boring. So in that way, silver is still kind of like the XLM to the XRP comparison that I was telling people about a little earlier. Like you'll have a way more ROI potential in silver given the current charts that we're working with. And if anyone disagrees with that, that's fine, but I think that's just basics. It's not too complicated to imagine why that would be the case. So silver looking very good. I mean, obviously very crucial monthly close that it just had up 8%, and bi-monthly is the highest we've seen, also going back to 2011, and this 4 month highest we've seen also going back to the beginning of 2011. 14 years ago, man. So this thing's definitely catching up. Now let's go to the Dow. I'm not going to spend too much time on the traditional markets, but again, we have a new 4 month candle close at all-time highs, bi-monthly at all-time highs, monthly even breaking all-time highs, and we were having some resistance here at the 45,000 point level. You could see right here for November, December of last year, New Year's, February before the correction, and even last month in July having an issue with that 45,000 point level, and since we've broken above it. And of course, it's the interest rate stuff that's making the traditional markets froth at the mouth. Um, Looking at the bi-weekly, that would also be closing in price discovery as well. So that's very good to see. The weekly close also just unbelievable because we got that really powerful weekly close the week prior, but then this was an absorption candle that we got last week. So even though it didn't look so amazing, it's not the worst thing to see, considering on the macro sense, we have monthly, bi-monthly, and 4 month closing the way that it did. It's very significant. And we're not really there to the point where it's super exhausted. I mean, on this 4 month RSI, we've seen it get to the 90s. It's like on the weekly. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously going to look like a bearish divergence. But yeah, there's room to run here to the 80s for sure on the RSI and on the monthly. And that would make sense to me overall if we have a little bit of weirdness in the month of September, and then October's a pivot, November is like this overheated time frame, and then we get that correction potentially December, but we'll see how this goes. It's kind of tough to play it right now with the conversation between the stock market and the crypto market, because although they do move synergistically, like they move quite similarly to each other, we have seen that the stock market tends to top after the crypto market tops. So if Bitcoin and the overall altcoin market are to top within this calendar year, November, December, it would not be weird to see it extend out a little further for the traditional markets into, like, let's just say January. I'm pretty sure that was the case last cycle too, but let me just show you what I'm talking about here. So we have here November, we were pretty bullish until about New Year, but the crypto market looked like shit by New Year's 2022. Let's look at the S&P. The S&P was even higher into past New Year's of 2022. That was not the case for Bitcoin. So there's a couple examples already that you can see. NASDAQ made it all the way up into New Year's looking pretty good. Crypto market did not look good. Here we had January 5th on the Dow Jones. This could be the case where you see this major move from November to December. That correction right there could be something we also get this time around too. And it could put a lot of pressure on the crypto market, and that could be the end while we have the stock market push up one final breath to the upside and completed by the new year. Let's look at the NASDAQ, look at the Russell. Now, what I just showed you a little bit ago, we're not quite there on the Russell, but this is promising. So we have the monthly, the highest candle close that we've seen since November, end of last year. The bi-monthly is a new all-time high, and the 4-month new all-time high. This is madness to see. Look at the weekly. The weekly even looked great comparatively to the S&P, NASDAQ, and Dow. So this looks really good. It's like not bad at all, man. Wow. Yeah, pretty wild to see. This could be like a wicked inverse head and shoulders pattern that plays out, and then we can get to the 3000s on the NASDAQ. Let me just pull a generic fib. It's a great fib to have because we can see there's multiple touch points on that double top, and then we also have multiple touch points on the bottom, so this feels clean. And then even the initial level of around 2,963, I think that aligns with that 3,000 target that I've said. So I could see that 3,000 target being hit within this year. We'll go ahead and mark it. It's a nice clean level. And then on the extremes, we could potentially push a little bit higher, but we'll have to see. That's pretty exhausted. So for here, we're only looking at about an additional 26%. And this could take all the way until the end of the calendar year to pull off. But it would be this expansion phase that we've already seen like that. Off of this little backup, we burst through it. Show you. So we have here. It's like you needed the C19 crash, just like we needed the tariff crash. And then this first chop over here is over here. And then what we're getting, kind of like consider it that way. It's the spring back to break above. And then once we get above into price discovery, we should have this, where it's just many, many weeks after weeks. Not many, but here. Consider it took about 100 days for most of the action. So if that was completed, if that started in late September, this still gets you to where your target range of most of the gains by the end of the year into the new year timeframe. So we saw this after following the C19 crash, just like we're getting the same energy right now, and confirmations with the way this past 2 weeks played out on the Russell, which I think translates well to an incoming alt season for the traditional markets, or for the crypto market. Let's look at Bitcoin. I don't think this is going to be the nicest looking weekly close. But one thing to say about what Bitcoin's doing right now, and one thing that makes me bullish on what I'm seeing right now, is the fact that we are back testing these prior peaks. And that's something that would have needed to happen anyways, although you want to quickly check in with this Bitcoin CME chart, and we have a wild gap to the upside. So we are now even further away, which would require Bitcoin to get around to 117K. Now you want to think about that, how we could have something like this, maybe like 105, 106K, and then we have up into the 19th, fill the gap, and then we do some weird shit like this, and then it goes. So it could go like that, where we open up next week, get a little bit of pain, and then we recover into the FOMC, and then we push down after Rosh Hashanah, everything I told you a little bit earlier. And then right here, after this like October full moon time frame, which I told you is October 7th, we'd be pushing up for the next leg higher. So the odds of a new all-time high in the month of September are less likely unless we get a major news update leading into the FOMC, in my opinion. But at this point, I'm not really too concerned about what Bitcoin's price is. I'm just looking at Bitcoin dominance and USDT dominance and how it's relating back to the altcoins because at this point I'm pretty much only focused on altcoins. So yeah, this is late stage in the cycle, and to have such a major upside gap clearly feels like a trap for what we're getting right now. And we don't need to go lower, by the way. The idea of us going lower is just because we've seen these eclipses tend to have some more pain before it gets better. That's kind of the concept that I've explored with you all many times. So we have major gap on Bitcoin dominance. I'm showing you a little bit of a play here with the timing of things. Keep an open mind, but I think this is potentially the play. And then we have Bitcoin Bitcoin dominance yet again showing a lot of weakness. We've now swiped down to the macro 618 fib, and once we can't hold that level, your next step would be whatever your structural lows were, which is also around this 0.5 fib. So we're looking for a 54% Bitcoin dominance ahead of us, and that could definitely be, depending on the way that ETH reacts to this upcoming lunar eclipse, I think we can start to see that push down towards 55%, 54% completed probably before October. It would make sense. And then you know what? It would also be normal to see Bitcoin regain some dominance, probably for the month of October, and then into early November or something like that, like around the November new moon is about as long as I see Bitcoin lasting personally, in my opinion. Like, if we can make it to the December new moon, then great. Like, who cares? It's just a 30-day difference. But the point is that November new moon or December new moon is typically where Bitcoin likes to top out. So we're gonna have this all happen in like a step-by-step formula. I would be considering that we could have Bitcoin dominance continue to drop a little bit more into September, pivot up a little bit into October, regain some of its dominance, and then when ETH finally tops out, we could just have it fully collapse even more. So gives you a little bit of an outlook there. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about ETH. We just got a fake out last week, and we're still chopping between the 888 fib and the all-time high. So filling out this area is nice. It's needed. Why? Because we were getting rejected at this level here at the 888 fib forever, and we're finally breaking above it. So filling out this area around this 4,100 to 4,500, 4,600 is healthy. Spending a little bit of time here could very well be the play. And what I showed you all with the earlier analysis on Ethereum, it took about 14 days for us to get through this sideways chop after we hit that initial all-time high. And that would align with right after the eclipse, or on the day of the eclipse technically, but we'll call it after the eclipse. Heading into this partial solar eclipse, which will be on September 21st, we could already see more expansion on Ethereum. This is kind of why I'm entertaining the idea that we can have a bullish release of energy between that second to third week of October or of September. So right here, the 37th till the 38th week of the year. That's kind of like what I believe would be the timing for a more bullish release of energy. And then we could definitely have some weirdness going on for the 39th into 41st. And then, you know, the 47th week of the year tied to that 47 number, and the fact that we have the November new moon during then, that would be a classic time for Bitcoin to hit an all-time high, like a cycle peak all-time high, for example. So ETH's looking pretty good. XRP, now XRP is back testing its bottom of the range, what it came back to around early August. So it's just been sideways overall in the month of August, back testing a lot of this, all of these rejection points that we were getting around December 2024, and even this point right here in February before the eclipse season, and this March pump and dump that we had with Trump announcing the strategic reserve, which included XRP, and that ended up being fake news. And we're just back testing all of those rejection points. It kind of looks like an as above, so below, right? Where we had all of this bottoming rejections. Now that we broke above it, we're just retesting to confirm that as a new support, which is a very bullish structure. And hopefully it holds, because I believe if we're to start trading below this let's call it 276 on the daily, we can definitely swipe down to 250. 255-ish would be the next level. So if this cannot hold, a quick slight swipe to 255 is in the cards, and it will look something like this, or it could just be a very brutal washout, and in 48 hours we could be bought right back up. Same thing goes for this time frame here. And now this is something we did last year as well regarding the timing. So you see we topped in July. Here we topped in July. Then we had a correction here into the beginning of August, correction here into the beginning of August. We got bought back up, did this lower high, and then we came down into the first week of September. That's literally what we're doing now. Same thing. Then we had this really elusive October, okay? Not the same setup for us this year because, again, we were waiting for the election on November 5th. So it was like this waiting game for election results. We don't have that shit this time around. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be a wait for the month of November for some like big grand exoteric event. I think it has more to do with the timing of getting out of eclipse season. So even by the later stages of October, we could be seeing alts doing very well as Bitcoin has moved up into price discovery yet again, and also ETH has moved up into price discovery, which will bring a lot of FOMO to altcoins. And the next move for XRP, and I've stated this so many times, it will be a FOMO move. That's how the cycles always end. The end of a cycle is just retail piling in to become exit liquidity. So the point is that in order to have those expansive moves to the upside, it's typically not smart money that's causing it. No offense, and this isn't to label anyone as anything. It's just how it worked in all past moves up for XRP especially. So here we are. And like I said, I think this will have to do with an everything goes up sort of energy. And right now, with ETH stealing dominance, it's going to put XRP into this pressure cooker where it will build and build the pressure. And when it releases, it will look the same. It'll be a straight line breakout like we always see with XRP. So I'm anticipating that as well. But as for the analysis, I've already shared, we have to hold that 270 level. Otherwise, a swipe down to 255 will happen. I do think the swipe down to 255 will be bought up quickly, and then we will likely continue to recover throughout the rest of September into October. And then November, December should be a very nice looking time frame for XRP. We go back to over here. We saw that was also the case in 2017. Let me show you. So we can see here, we actually had our pivot low during the month of September, a higher low into October, and then a release from December. This was about 28 days, by the way. Straight line breakout from this December into the very beginning of January. But we had different eclipses back then, so just consider that. Definitely different eclipses. All right, let's move on to Ondo Finance and then get through our altcoins for today's Red Pill podcast. I've done Ondo in the past. All right, so this major pivot trend line is something that it's been snaking around. What I'm looking at right now is just this major fib pull from this swing high to this swing low, and the fact that we did hit the 1618. So this would have been a very important place to de-risk at least, because if you got in this project in any of these weeks leading up into this first major correction, which happened here, if I just take about 50% of that range and I bring you to this all-time high, it's a pretty decent move. And especially since it's had a 70% correction, it's been chopping sideways. So this does to me look like it's building up a little bit of like an inverse head and shoulders, even though I'm not the biggest fan of those sort of calls. It does feel like we're getting some resistance right here. And delete this because it's an unimportant trend line for the most part. And this one, on the other hand, I think is a lot more significant. So I'm going to extend the left line and you'll see where we're rising and falling. So first major back test of this key level, pumped above, started to treat it as support temporarily, got below it, started treating it as resistance temporarily, got above it, came right back to it, started treating it as resistance temporarily, and then recently we've retested it on late July. Now we're seeing the significance of this trend line going all the way back to pretty much its genesis. So what I think we need on Ondo is to clear this 702 fib somewhere around this like 120, 130 level, and then we could expand into the next fib, which will align with around $3. And there's definitely something here with this upper trend line to consider as well, because I've seen this before. When you have a rising parallel channel where you have higher highs and higher lows from the launch, you'll see that the next high will probably correlate with the rejection points on the prior two highs. So you have your third time a charm trend line kind of idea here. And looking where we are now to the next retest, it'd be about $3 sometime in October, potentially November. We could definitely get above that line. You know, there's nothing saying that's an impossibility. It just might have a little chop. So it could go something like this. I'm not saying September would be maybe not fair, but like something like that, depending on Bitcoin dominance. And then it has like, imagine this trend line still going. It has this weird kind of moment here, and then just one final peak, and then does like a head and shoulders pattern to the bear market, which gives you somewhere around this $5 level. Also in alignment with the 4236 and up to the 4618. Very common level for you to see rejections. So that's now the move of another 400%. Not entirely sure how much more juice will be in this fruit, but it's something to consider for people who are invested in Ondo. You probably still have a little bit more ROI ahead on some other projects, but consider this is not a bad looking chart at all. And I know enough about Ondo to be aware that it's a sensible investment to get into this project. I would, based off of my limited research, still feel like this is a safer play to be in. So, decent looking chart. Not enough chart history for me to really go too deep. The chart overall is trending up. The higher highs, the higher lows, and projection overall up. Looking good. Good start. Now we're going to a project that is literally called Doge Elon Mars. What the hell? All right, let's have fun. This is the best chart I could find going back to May of 2021. So this was like kind of in the final stages of the last cycle. Whoever initially bought it got a nice rise, but then it had probably a 90% correction. Yeah, literally 90%. And then it skyrocketed up off of this double bottom about another 4,000%. So this is like typical meme coin movement. And now since this bull run, this has been an absolute shit coin, and it is still down 95% from its prior. And I didn't even go all the way up. I'm pulling from the secondary rejection, which will be your bull trap that leads you into a bear market. Still down 95%, and it's back trading where pretty much it launched. Now that's fair. A lot of coins have done this in the 2021 cycle to where we are today. I'm not isolating this one as it's just a meme coin. You know, it does what it does based on the positive memery going on in the world stage, right? It's like a cultural moment. And Elon and Doge and Mars, that was all a cultural moment of 2021. Now, since this has been a much worse investment than just going into Doge, because Doge, you can see when it bottomed out. I'll just give a quick example again. So let's see where Doge bottomed out. We have it in June 2022. So it actually bottomed with ETH, which is really cool to know. And now we're currently up 333%. There was a chance to exit almost 850% up, but like just comparing to where we are today, 330% up. If we were to have bought any of this bear market stuff, like a majority of the bear market lows, 250%, let's just say. While this in June is still down another 50%, and there was nowhere you could have bought it in this current market where you'd be in profit because it's still down even lower today. So I hope this gets people to understand what we're dealing with here. Like you're in infinite losses unless you bought the very like backup phase over here in August 2021, or if you bought this launch and got in super early. So this is not an investment hold. This is a speculative meme coin, and you have to be very careful with these things. So I would just go ahead and say there's a big difference between what we were just looking at with the Ondo finance chart and this Doji Elon Musk chart, and also we can point to Ondo having some use case. And yeah, go do your own research, but I'm sure you could put your, you know, brain cells together to assume the use case of Doge Elon Mars. So yeah, in this case, I don't know if our world is ready to have another full-blown meme cycle like we finished off in November, December of last year, leading up into Trump's inauguration in January. I think it's all gonna look much worse moving forward. And the OG projects are like the very, very big meme coins, such as Doge, probably Pepe, maybe a couple others. I know this like Pengu one is doing very well. Like it will need to have a cultural moment attached to it that's giving it a lot of attention, which Elon doesn't right now. And all of that stuff was very much the 2021 cycle. So I'll say that when you're going to get into memes, it needs to be part of an active current cultural moment. And the only reason I went with Doge, for instance, as part of my investment thesis was because of past chart history and the fact that it always has broken into price discovery every time Bitcoin has broken into price discovery, and it's always hit the 1618 fib in every cycle, along with Bitcoin breaking out into price discovery. And so far, it's not looking far off from its final move up into the final stage of the cycle, which is the euphoric, everything is very greedy part of the cycle, which we're not in yet. So until we get there, if we're in like ultimate greed and Doge is still performing poorly, then it was a bad investment. I'll admit it, and we'll take it from there. But for now on, structurally and the way that I see it moving, it's just trending up. Perpetual higher lows and perpetual higher highs. And the next higher high, I assume, will break this peak. This, on the other hand, has just been trending down. Clearly not the best thing to give your attention to. Again, no offense. I'm not trying to. I know lately people have been getting a little mad. Certain things they say. I guess that's what it is to be in my position. Anyways, let's keep it going. We have Litecoin. Now, this is not looking so bad, in my opinion. Um, Obviously, would be better in this cycle to be positioned in XRP because this is also a project that has trading going back to 2013, 2014, similar to Dogecoin, similar to XRP. But here we are looking at this off of the absolute lows, about 150%, while XRP is up 800%, right? So yeah, Litecoin, and again, I know there were some triggering moments in the last red pill with like Bitcoin Cash, and my whole point about these OG coins is I think we're just like moving into a new type of environment regarding the OG projects, and I can see Tron's like looking. Tron isn't really an OG project, is it? I don't think it has chart history back in 2014. Yeah, I just think we're moving into kind of like a new thing, where we are figuring it all out, and clearly you don't need to have much utility. While Litecoin kind of sold itself on having the utility back in the 2016 to 2018 cycle, Bitcoin now has this institutional conversation that's helping it quite a bit. I know a lot of people are banking on XRP getting an ETF, and that will definitely bring more attention to that. So yeah, like I think Litecoin is just in this weird gray area where it's an OG project. It doesn't have like that really big community behind it that's taking over the algorithm, like XRP is, for example, or like Caspa was, or maybe some other isolated altcoins. So it's in this weird gray area, in my opinion. Now, that's not the technicals. As for the technical perspective, this doesn't look so bad to me because it's a higher lows uptrend with some higher highs, and it's on its way towards a reversal. The thing that it needs to get past is this area right here of $131 that it's been rejected off of back in June 2019. It was a momentary support here in the peak of the last cycle. And then once we broke below that same level, we've been dealing with that as a resistance again. So 131 is definitely troublesome. And just keep that in mind. If we can break above this 130, let's call it 135 on a weekly close, I think it will start to expand up towards the 888 pretty quickly. Now, the 888 is an ultimate target on Litecoin because that's where all of our past rejections came in. That's where the 2017 cycle top was. That's around where the 2021 cycle top was. And that's also around where this bull trap in November 2021 was, which, by the way, Bitcoin was higher at this point. So this is not following Bitcoin's like bullish energy at all anymore. Remember, Bitcoin was 19,000 back here. Today, Bitcoin's 108,000. So the only way this would have ever felt good is if you bought like back in 2016 or if you were just trading in and out of it. And this cycle, you clearly have way less volatility than the last one. Just look at these major waves. While here, we've just been slowly grinding up. So keep that in mind. This is probably too boring for most of you. Probably doesn't have enough ROI for most of you. Now, for those OG investors that are holding on to it, I don't feel like this is bad to like, I wouldn't let go of it all, for instance, because I think during an alt season, it will do what every altcoin does, but still probably more ROI potential in a lot of other projects. I would just go for things like HBAR, XLM, maybe even Aerodrome is another one. Like Aerodrome had like quite a hell of a week, but still it's just back testing a major trend line that's been in place since it bottomed out in the tariff crash. So keep it in mind. I mean, in general, there's just a lot more exciting plays. So it's not saying anything negative about Litecoin. I'm just kind of, yeah, you get where I'm going with this. Now we're going to go to Corium. I have no idea the last time I checked this project out, but still pretty sideways it seems. Oh yeah, this is a weird chart where like the Coin Gecko all-time high is around 70 cents, whilst the coin market cap all-time high is $11. So working with that is really troublesome, but at least I have around this 70 cents, a little bit of data here on this chart. So this is a tough one to have clean analysis, but bear with me here. Let's extend out this. See, during the tariff crash time, we did get a swipe back to the ultimate lows. This has been holding structure. I mean, it had a major move up in December to the top of the golden pocket. That's kind of, you know, an area to de-risk, maybe not an area to take profits. But I teach that in my exit strategy blueprint that if you want to know where to de-risk, it's around the golden pocket and up to the 888 fib. That's where it feels good to get your money back. De-risking means you're taking your initial investment out of the picture. And since this has had quite a correction, I mean, 76%, so this is not following ETH right now. It's definitely not following Bitcoin. It's not following Binance token. It's not following XRP, for example, in regards to where it's at in the grand scheme of things. If you bought the absolute lows, you're only up 150%. With the XRP play, you're up much, much more, 7 times that. And yeah, so this is, again, you got to be very careful with holding large amounts of charts that look like this. We call this venture capital, where you want to have like less than 3%. Keep it around 1 or 2%, throw a couple $100 in, have fun. But if you only have $1,000 to invest, I would maybe even avoid stuff that looks like this altogether regarding the charts, just because the money really matters to you at that point. If you have $100,000, then there's nothing wrong with going in, maybe a couple of grand in a project like this just for fun. But you want to always be safe in crypto land because stuff like this is in price discovery to the downside, guys. We have low in 2022, lower low in 2023, lower low in 2024. This is not good. This is not something as a technical analyst where I could look at it and tell you confidently that I would want you to invest in this. So moving forward, I'm going to be much more neutral in my analysis. I'm going to be maybe less spicy to avoid the drama. So hope you guys appreciate that. But generally, yeah, this kind of stuff is just I would avoid personally based on this chart. And again, there will be an alt season with a speculative run where everything does really well. But yeah, it's really tough to be so excited when you're looking at charts like this. But can this thing retest the 70 cent level? For sure. Can it make it up to the 1618 fib? Eh, I don't know. Maybe this $1 at best. Maybe it makes it to $1. And then great. Yeah, 600% play is great. You'd have to really play that one quick though. Lastly, Dent. Where are we at? It's not sure when the last time I covered this was. We're looking at the weekly here. All right. Now, this thing is like around where it was during the tariff nonsense. We're on the weekly chart, by the way. Ooh, this is interesting because I would assume there's some dilution going on here. So this may be one of those charts where it's better to look at like market cap. But regardless, we have a major peak in January 2018. We have a higher low peak in April 2021. That was our last alt season. And you can see the way this thing moves is fast. This was 35 days. So like most of the gains on this project happened in 35 days. Let's call it a month. 16,000%, by the way. It's fucking madness. Okay, let's see. Yep, so right there, pivot, 35 days. It went up 1,400%. Most of the gains are being made in this final swoop up. It's 2 months before or so. Yeah, 2 months before, 10,000%. So this thing could do some wild shit. Wow. Yeah, this would be a decent project in my opinion to treat as venture capital. Completely opposite of this Corium chart. It has a lot of years of chart history too. That's nice to see. But this is something where I would assume it's been diluted quite a bit. So that's why the chart looks the way that it does. Perhaps it did hit a new all-time high in market cap in April 2021. Sure. But yeah, it seems that this line right here around 0015 is crucial. So if it could get above 0016 on like a monthly or 2 month candle close, that's when I guess it'll get pretty exciting. And it's been treating this 006 level as a support going back to November of 2022. So that's been like around the bear market lows for 1,000 days now. Very fascinating. It's like it had to lose all of its value. Look, 99.9%. It had to lose all of its value to have this move effectively. So 97%. So from this top, it's still down 96%. Wow. So yeah, during an alt season, we could have these sorts of moves in a single calendar month, as I just showed you, how it moved up. I mean, this was 2 months, right? 70 days, it went up 8,000, 7,000%. That'd be amazing if that happened. Given the timing, I mean, if this was to happen into, yeah, even just late October, that'd be wild. If it could revisit this 2 to 3 cent level, that'd be a crazy profit. So yeah, Dent, very interesting. This is definitely something that I wouldn't mind putting some venture capital in. I don't put too much in nowadays because I'm kind of just letting things develop and I don't want to put too much fresh money in the market just for no reason. There needs to be a very important reason. And with eclipse season ahead, we'll see what surprises come our way. And if that's the case, where we do get a little bit of a washout, I'll consider stuff like this. Stuff that I take a note on that could be notable for a venture capital play. Something where you just throw a little bit in and you can get quite a bit out. But yeah, looking at where everything is at right now, it seems like the crypto market is just back testing the prior peak from the end of last year. And hopefully, when we get the market open back up after Labor Day into September 1st, we will start to see a little bit of a balance because I think there will be heightened energy around September 2nd through September 8th. Again, all around our total lunar eclipse. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. Hope you all enjoyed today's Red Pill podcast, and I'll be catching you all very soon with a mid-week update, following up probably on Tuesday after the traditional markets reopen, following up that 3-day weekend. We'll see how that all goes down, and wishing you all an amazing rest of your day in the Matrix. Much love.